Okay, well, here we go. Well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. As Melissa mentioned, I'm Linda Remsburg. I'm an associate with Grow and Lead Community and Youth Development. Grow and Lead is a capacity building organization for nonprofits. We're based in Marquette and we work throughout the entire UP. We provide training and consulting, facilitation, and resources to nonprofits of all types and sizes to help them meet their missions. Oops. There we go. I'll start out, I'll tell you a little bit about my background and then introduce Andrew. So I've been with Grow and Lead since 2007, and one of my areas of experience and interest is youth engagement. Prior to joining Grow and Lead, I was the director of 818 Media, which is a youth journalism program at the UP Children's Museum in Marquette. 818 Media is essentially a news bureau for kids ages 8 to 18, and they report on issues that affect their lives. It's primarily for an adult audience. Their stories are published in the local newspaper and broadcast on local radio. It's a very youth-driven program, and the young people work closely, really in partnership with the adult director, and are involved in decisions both big and small that affect how the program operates. The program is still going strong today, and it's had and continues to have a really big positive impact on kids and adults like myself. And I'm really delighted today to have one of my former 818 Media kids, Andrew Lacombe, with us. Andrew is the news director of WLUC TV here in the UP. He's involved in numerous community activities around the Marquette area. He's currently the president of the Marquette Symphony Orchestra Board of Directors. He serves on the board of the UP Children's Museum, and he's a past co-chair of the United Way of Marquette County's annual campaign. So he's just a very involved community member. And Andrew is going to provide some perspective today as a millennial who grew up serving in nonprofits and working as a young person in partnership with adults. So welcome, Andrew. Are you there, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Yeah. Well, hi.
Hello. Yeah. So do you want to? Yeah.
Well, why don't you go ahead and just share some of your background of being involved with nonprofits from a very young age?
Absolutely. So the UP Children's Museum Board, again, 818 Media is a program of the UP Children's Museum. Always had a youth member. Usually it was someone who was at 16 or older because of voting rules for nonprofit boards. But I was asked to join when I was 15, and that was because of my involvement with the UP Children's Museum. I served on that organization's board, and I'm actually back on the board now in my third go around because it's a great organization. And but being one of about a dozen board members, but I was the only one, younger than 18, was an eye-opening experience. And with the right setup that we had, it really made me feel like my voice mattered in this organization, and gave me a chance to meet some influential people in the community. And it was a big reason why I chose to come back here and live after college, because I got to see all the opportunities around me in Marquette.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. I really appreciate having you here today. It's been one of the great joys of my life to have watched you and the other kids in 818 Media grow and develop into, amazing adults. And we'll be tapping more into your insight and experience throughout the webinar. So that's a little about us and how we've engaged young people or have been engaged as a young person. And I'd like to hear from all the rest of you that are on the call today about how your organization engages young people. So Melissa, can you launch the poll? We have a little quick poll for you. All right, I'm not sure what you folks are seeing. Can you, okay, there we go. All right. All right. What best describes your organization? Okay, it looks like
Let me share the results. It looks like it's still moving.
Yeah, I thought it was stopped there, but
yeah, okay.
Somebody's still answering.
Yeah, we'll give it one more second here. Okay, now I think I can end it and we can share the results.
All right, so about a quarter of you said that we work for the benefit of young people in your organizations. 18% we work with young people for their benefit, or we work with young people for their benefit. 37%, the largest percent, let's see, we work with young people for their benefit in our organization's benefit, and then 21%, so fifth, don't currently work with young people, but they're interested. So, well, thank you for doing that. It's nice to see where everybody's at. And no matter how you answered in the poll, you know, we hope that you'll gain something from this webinar that helps you, and I believe you will. Just a little note here, we'll save time, of course, at the end of the presentation for Q&A, but as you think of questions, feel free to post in the chat, or if you have comments or you need to let us know about technical issues or what have you, you can put that in the chat box too, and Melissa will keep an eye out for any of that. So right now I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera to help minimize any internet issues. So let's see if I can do that. There we go. All right, and let's move the poll there and we'll continue on. Well, engaging young people in nonprofits is something that I'm personally very passionate about, and it's really something that we're all passionate about at Grow and Lead. It's central to Grow and Lead's purpose, so central that we have it reflected in our name, Grow and Lead Community and Youth Development. And when we refer to youth, oh, I think someone isn't muted there. It's kind of coming through. So when we refer to youth, we're primarily talking about ages 18 and under. For the purposes of this webinar, we'll be talking more specifically around middle to high school age, so roughly 12 to 18. I'd like to briefly share where Grow and Lead has come from regarding youth development and how we've gotten to where we are today as a capacity building organization for nonprofits. Our journey kind of speaks directly to the topic of youth engagement. So Grow and Lead began in the late 80s as part of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, which had made a 20-year commitment to improve the environment, or the youth environment, I should say, in Marquette and Elger counties in the UP. Under Kellogg, we provided grants to help establish and support youth-serving organizations. We provided training around positive youth development. we adopted the research-based framework of 40 developmental assets for youth. And we use that framework to get people from all parts of the community speaking a common language around youth development and working together to support and build on the strengths of youth. And in our work with youth serving organizations, we found that not only did they want training and support around youth development, but they also really wanted and needed training and support in operating and sustaining their organizations. And this led us to take on the role of a support organization for nonprofits, not only youth serving organizations, but nonprofits of all missions. We know that a strong nonprofit community is essential for healthy youth and families. Nonprofits provide services that youth and entire communities need in order to thrive. We also know that nonprofit work is challenging, and it's often driven by volunteers who have, you know, a lot of passion, but maybe more limited in experience of running a nonprofit business. And so we adapted to the needs that we saw, and we transitioned to being a capacity builder for nonprofits across the UP. Youth development is still at the core of Grow and Lead's reason for being, which is to improve the youth environment so all youth can thrive. But like nonprofits often do as they mature and grow, this transition presented us with a challenge. And that challenge is that for a time, we struggled a bit, feeling like we had two arms of our work. One arm being youth development and the other being nonprofit capacity building. Both inside the organization and out in the community, we had a bit of a hard time articulating the relationship between these aspects of our work. And that brings us to today. As an organization, we've brought those two arms together. You could say we've gotten our arms around this idea of engaging youth in the work of nonprofits, not only being essential for the health and development of young people, but it's also essential for the health and development of nonprofits themselves. There really aren't two separate arms. Youth development fits into nonprofit capacity building. In fact, I would say it's an essential part of nonprofit capacity building. And that brings us to our training objectives for this webinar. We hope that today you'll learn how nonprofits are uniquely positioned to help young people develop in healthy ways. We hope you'll understand how engaging youth is essential to nonprofits. And we'll be sharing some tools and strategies and tips for engaging young people in your organizations effectively. There are a couple terms that I'll refer to throughout our time together today, and those are positive youth development and youth engagement. We'll look at each of those terms so we have a common understanding of what I'm referring to. And first, positive youth development. Here's a definition that I think sums it up well. And I'll read through it and then break it apart a little bit. So positive youth development is an intentional, pro-social approach that engages youth within their communities, schools, organizations, peer groups, and families in a manner that's productive and constructive, recognizes, utilizes, and enhances young people's strengths, and promotes positive outcomes for young people by providing opportunities, fostering positive relationships, and furnishing the support needed to build on their leadership strengths. So positive youth development is an approach or a philosophy that promotes a set of guidelines on how a community can support its young people so they can grow up competent, healthy, and to develop to their full potential. There are many evidence-based frameworks for positive youth development that have been used around the nation and here in Michigan. 40 developmental assets for youth from Search Institute, which I mentioned earlier, is one of them. That's one that we've based our work on here at Grow and Lead over the years. Within the last few years, Search has rolled out a new framework of developmental relationships. There's also the social development strategy that Communities That Care coalitions use. Another framework is 5 Promises from America's Promise. They're all a little different, but they share some key components. So what are those components? Well, here they are. Positive youth development is an investment that a community makes in young people. All parts of a community play a role. That includes, of course, the nonprofit community. It takes intentional effort. It fosters relationships, provides support, builds on the strength of young people, and recognizes them as resources and contributors to the community. Positive youth development involves youth as active agents of change. Youth are valued and encouraged to participate in the design, delivery, and evaluation of services. Youth and adults work as partners, sharing decision-making to find solutions and work toward common goals. The research behind positive youth development shows that it leads to positive outcomes for young people. They're less likely to participate in harmful behaviors, such as substance abuse and violence, and are much more likely to grow up healthy, competent, and caring. They do better academically, and they're more resilient in the face of trauma. So that's positive youth development. Then there's the term youth engagement, which is easier to define. In its simplest terms, it's really just the act of engaging youth. When we talk about youth engagement in the nonprofit sector, we're referring to engaging with young people in our organizations in ways that are consistent with positive youth development. It goes beyond doing things for young people and really working in partnership with them. And this has benefits for the young people and benefits for the nonprofits themselves. So all sectors of a community have a role to play in the development of young people. And the nonprofit sector is really in a perfect position, I think, to make a huge impact on youth. And here are some of the ways that we are perfectly positioned to do this. First, one of the things young people need most in their lives is relationships with caring adults. They need strong role models and allies. Nonprofits are full of caring, competent adults. The reason we're part of nonprofits is because we care deeply about our mission and about creating positive change in our communities. Second, nonprofits make a difference in young people's lives. Many of our nonprofits serve youth very directly, and virtually all nonprofits, regardless of their mission, are for the greater good. You know, the common good, to benefit society as a whole. And that includes youth in the present and in their futures. Young people deserve to be actively involved in bettering their lives. Nonprofits are a connection to community. They're bigger than just the individual the organization. Youth benefit very much from experiencing a sense of community and making an impact that's extended beyond themselves. Nonprofits have the potential to provide opportunities for youth to learn and practice leadership skills such as problem solving, decision making, positive values such as integrity and responsibility, and social competencies such as confidence and peaceful conflict resolution. These all will serve young people, of course, throughout their entire life. And finally, nonprofits need to hear from the people they serve, and oftentimes those people are our youth. And likewise, youth need opportunities to be heard. So these are just some of the ways that young people benefit from being engaged in nonprofits. They all contribute to the young people's healthy development, and there's really a mutually beneficial relationship between young people and nonprofits. Organizations and the adults in them benefit as much as young people do. So Andrew, I'd like to call you back here for a minute. Do any of these points particularly resonate with you and your experience?
I think two that really resonate with me are the caring adults. I met so many caring adults that are still some of the biggest influences in my life, 15 years later. And I think just knowing, being in a position where, I could talk one-on-one or in a small group setting with some of these adults who are also, active in the community just left a huge impact on me. And the second is leadership development. I think, 818 Media is a leadership program through journalism, but it really gave me confidence. And being on these boards taught me a lot of problem solving, seeing some, real financial problems and ways to get out of them, and just understanding the responsibility that a board has and that an individual has in their community. So I'd say those are two really two things that really stuck with me from my youth board experience.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. As I mentioned, there are benefits for the adults, of course, that are working with young people too. So let's look at a few of those. Young people bring new perspectives and new ideas. They see things in different ways through a different lens. And they see things that adults might miss. And this can lead to new strategies and solutions to longstanding problems. Young people bring energy that's rejuvenating and refreshing and can boost morale. I think it's really fun to work with work with kids. In my experience, having youth in a group with adults tends to that are mostly adults tends to lighten the mood and brings out the best in the adults. Engaging youth has benefits for all nonprofits, but for nonprofits that serve youth, I think it's even more important in that it helps adults better understand the needs of the young people, which is essential to the relevancy of their programs and services that they're, serving the young people. It also helps the adults to feel more connected to the young people their organization serves. So I've talked about Grow and Lead being a capacity building organization for nonprofits. And I'd like to talk about how youth engagement kind of fits into the picture of building the capacity of a nonprofit to better meet its mission. I think we know that, it's a good thing to help develop young people, but it's not only for their benefit, but really it's part of building your capacity as a nonprofit. So it fits in a number of ways, and I'd like you to use your imaginations for a minute. I'm going to give you an illustration. So imagine, and bear with me on this, imagine there's a store where you can buy a kit to buy a nonprofit or to build a nonprofit, like a Lowe's or an IKEA for nonprofits. So you buy this nonprofit in a box and you take it home to assemble. And as you reach in and you're pulling out big pieces. You find one labeled community engagement. There's one labeled human resources, one labeled governance, and et cetera. So these are all important pieces or aspects of a nonprofit. And you also look in your box, and you'll also find a big bag labeled youth engagement, and that holds a bunch of smaller pieces. Well, each one of those small youth engagement pieces fits right into one of those big pieces of the nonprofit. So youth engagement fits into community engagement, which is about collaborating, forming partnerships and coalitions with community members. Youth engagement fits into diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is about respecting, valuing, and including a variety of voices and perspectives in the programs and policies of your organization. Youth engagement is part of human resources, which is about recruiting and maintaining the human capital, including volunteers needed to get a job done. It's part of governance, having a board with various strengths, skills, and experience with representation from those you serve. It fits into fund development and growing the next generation of donors and philanthropists to carry the work of the entire nonprofit sector forward. And finally, it fits into leadership succession, assuring that you have people who are invested advocates of your organization, who are competent and able to lead it into the future. And when all of these pieces are assembled, you have a structure that's functional, that's stable, and will last a long time. In other words, you have sustainability. Through engaging young people, you're able to sustain your organization. And that's how youth engagement is essential to nonprofits. It fits into all those important aspects of running a nonprofit and builds sustainability. So Grow and Lead has developed a tool to help you think about how to engage young people in your organization. And we call this the youth engagement pyramid. As you can see, it has 3 sections. There's a foundation there in blue, a middle section, and then the pinnacle or golden triangle where adults and youth are sharing decision-making and engaging as true partners. The foundation of the pyramid is built on the ideals and benefits of youth engagement. The ideals being those key components of positive youth development, recognizing youth as resources with strengths and contributions to make. And the other part is recognizing the benefits that youth bring, such as providing leadership and contributing to succession and sustainability. In order to engage youth effectively, you really need to have pretty solid buy-in from within your organization that working with youth is worthwhile and important. So if your nonprofit doesn't yet involve youth, but you'd like it to, one of the first steps to take would be to get buy-in throughout the organization. Not everyone may feel up to speed on the best ways to work with youth, but that can be learned and developed. What's important to the foundation is embracing those ideals and benefits and being willing to engage youth. The top 2 sections of the pyramid represent different levels of engaging with youth. So to reach those, the foundation really needs to be in place. And we can look at both of those top 2 sections separately here. I'm gonna skip over the middle section for a bit and go right to the top, the golden triangle of adult and youth partnership. This represents the highest level of adults working with young people. It's where adults and youth share meaningful decision-making, or in other words, where they share power. As adults, we like to feel in control, and it can be uncomfortable to share power, even with other adults, let alone teenagers. But that shared power is the critical element in helping young people develop true leadership skills. It's transformative for them, and that golden triangle is really where the magic happens. One of the prime ways we can share power with young people is inviting them to join us on our boards. In Michigan, anyone 16 or older can serve as a voting member on a nonprofit board. Engaging youth on your board isn't simple, but then neither is engaging adults on a board. Both involve a lot of preparation, setting and maintaining clear expectations, consistent communication, and nurturing. It's an ongoing process of building and sustaining a relationship. Another kind of high-level structure to engage young people is involving them in designing and delivering programming. If you're designing and providing programs for youth, you really should be working with them in the process. Their insight and perspective is invaluable. They're the ones that know what they need, what they like, and what works for them. As with youth on boards, engaging youth in programming also takes nurturing and communication. That's because you're building a sustained relationship with young people. And the key ingredient is that shared decision-making, relinquishing some of the power to them to determine how those programs look and operate. Andrew, could you reflect on your experience as a young person working in partnership with adults? So, having that shared decision making, and how was that important to you?
Well, it was important because I was often engaged really well throughout the process. I learned a lot at like committee meetings that boards would have, where you could go more into depth on certain issues, and I think even some adults benefited from maybe some further explanations, deeper explanations that that they didn't have as part of their background. And so just knowing that we were all on the same level just made such a difference. And it was genuine, and it wasn't fake. It was real from the other board members and from the executive director, who was a big part of the board meeting. So I think just having those, being parts of the process the entire way, just really made that shared decision making very evident.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So I'm going to talk about consulting and informing youth, which is that middle section of the pyramid. And this is a place where a lot of organizations that engage youth tend to operate. It's where adults consult and inform youth. It's really one step short of full-blown youth and adult partnerships like Andrew was just talking about. However, it does have benefit for youth and for your organization, but it's not as likely to have as great of an impact as that sharing decision-making power has. And an example of consulting and informing youth would be like conducting a focus group with young people. In a focus group, you'd typically explain to the kids what your intentions are, why you're seeking their input, and what you plan to do with the information gained from them. Then you ask them questions to learn about their experiences, their preferences, their opinions, and informed by their voices, then you can go out and take whatever action you determine is needed. And that could be something like putting different programs or services in place, or advocating for a certain policy, those sorts of things. Youth volunteer programs, youth advisory boards, and youth on committees also often operate at the level of consulting and informing youth. It's not a bad place to be. There's a secret ingredient, so to speak, at this level too, and that is youth voice. When young people have the opportunity to speak out on issues that affect them, and when they feel that they're being heard, it's very empowering. And what young people have to say really does matter. Their perspectives on current issues are very relevant to finding solutions, in that they aren't looking so much at how things have been, but how things are now. Youth have the biggest stake in the future, since they'll be around longer than we adults will. They have an important voice to share, and they deserve to be at the table sharing it. Keep in mind that any of the structures for working with young people that are listed in the middle section of the pyramid can be kind of elevated to the top level too. What it takes is adding in that key element of shared decision-making power. So youth having a voice is powerful, but when it's combined with shared power, that's when it's transformative. Like take the focus group, for instance. You could use a focus group as a jumping off point for working together with young people in more of an ongoing relationship, setting action steps towards shared goals. So now you've gone from consulting and informing youth to a true youth and adult partnership. A real life example of this in Michigan that people are probably familiar with it is the Community Foundation Youth Advisory Councils. They go beyond asking kids what sorts of projects they'd like to see in their communities to really empowering them to request and review grant proposals with training, of course, and then having the decision-making power to determine which projects receive funding. Andrew, you know, the UP Children's Museum, which I have to say is a real gem in the Upper Peninsula. I know there are a lot of people from different parts of the state on the call today, but if you have the chance to go to the UP Children's Museum, do it, because it's a wonderful, magical place. But anyway, so Andrew, the UP Children's Museum has always been a huge advocate of youth voice. I'd say it's one of the museum's core values, and 818 Media is really all about youth having opportunities to be heard. So could you talk a bit about how having opportunities as a kid to be heard in the community and to help other kids be heard, how did that play out in your life?
Yeah, well, I grew up always thinking I wanted to work in the journalism field, whether it be TV or something to do with writing. And so obviously 818 Media was a perfect fit for me, writing and interviewing tons of influential people. I ended up going to school for a music degree with a government minor, and that helped me get into the TV industry. And I came right back to Marquette. And now I've worked as a reporter, an investigative reporter, and use all those, that leadership and, knowing that my voice, my question matters, and speaking for people who don't have a voice and on their behalf, and worked. And now I've been out of college for 10 years, and now I'm the news director of a TV station and in charge of a staff of 30 people. So I think just, and along the way, I chose to live here still because I know of all the great nonprofit organizations that make such a difference in my community, and I want to be a part of that. And I know that if I live here, I can balance that and also be a part of a lot of different parts of our community. So, and that wouldn't be possible if I didn't have the experience as a teenager that I did in Marquette.
All right. Thank you. Um, so as you mentioned, Andrew, you've been out of school for a while, and I'd just like to take this moment to kind of acknowledge that things are different for kids these days, and they really need adult support now more than perhaps any time in recent history. Um, they need the support of community. There's a lot of data, national, state, and local data that show that anxiety and depression have been on the rise in our young people for quite a while, for years. But the pandemic has exacerbated that to a point where our country has currently a youth mental health crisis. And our nonprofits can help, and we should. We can be those caring adults. We can help kids connect to the community, and we can give them opportunities to have their voices heard. And we can help guide and empower them to make community change. All of these things have been proven scientifically to make a positive impact in the lives of kids, and to kind of mitigate the effect of stressors or risk factors in their lives. And this is all within our wheelhouse, within our scope of work in the nonprofit sector. We can help develop young people and strengthen our organizations in the process. So how do you get started in engaging youth in your organizations? If you're new to engaging youth, there are some steps you can take at the beginning that will help set you up for success. So here are some of those. First, assess your organization's readiness. Have conversations with your staff, your board, about bringing young people into the organization. Address any concerns or assumptions they might have about the capabilities of youth or the challenges they may present. Adults are likely to be at different levels of enthusiasm and readiness, and you may need to provide some group training or preparation to help them feel comfortable and ready. Determine what structures for engaging youth make the most sense for your organization. Maybe you want to start with offering some volunteer opportunities for youth in your programming, or maybe invite youth to be part of a committee. Maybe an all youth advisory board makes the most sense, or you can go right straight to the top of the pyramid and bring youth onto your board as full voting members. All of these are valid structures, but do whatever your organization needs and is ready for. Just be reasonably confident before you start, before you bring kids in, that you have the means to support, nurture, and expand their growth. As for recruiting, there are some things to consider. If your nonprofit serves youth, you can start your recruitment by looking among those you serve. They are likely to already feel a connection to your organization and may want to be involved. As I mentioned earlier, having a relationship with those you serve helps you stay relevant in your programs and services. Second, I would say start young and nurture. Voting board members need to be at least 16, but that doesn't need to stop you from bringing in younger youth in a non-voting capacity. At Grow and Lead, we've had some success over the years recruiting 15-year-olds as kind of board members in training. They participated in board meetings in a non-voting capacity as part of a mentoring, orientation, consulting period before they turned 16 and transitioned into voting board members. You can ask your staff and board to use their networks to identify prospects. A personal ask from an adult that the young person knows and trusts is one of the most effective ways to recruit. But a personal ask from another youth is even better. So if you're already engaging youth, encourage them to help identify and talk with prospects. It can also be helpful to reach out to school personnel for recommendations. Look for youth who are interested but not overcommitted. Keep an open mind about who you recruit. You don't necessarily have to find kids who already exhibit, great leadership skills. It's more important to find someone who's interested and willing, and then you can determine what supports you will need to provide for them in order for them to be successful. Here are some best practices for engaging youth and nonprofits. They can apply to any adult and youth partnership, and I think they especially apply to youth on boards. First, try to involve at least 2 youth in groups that are otherwise all adults. This can go a long way toward increasing the young people's comfort level. It also helps prevent tokenism, which is when it appears that youth are experiencing shared power, but in reality, they have little choice or voice. Provide a robust orientation so youth know up front what to expect and what's expected of them. Even if they're somewhat familiar with your organization, they'll likely need to learn more about its purpose, its mission, its history. Help them get to know staff and the other people in the group they'll be working with, what their roles and responsibilities are, and how the group operates. Also provide any training or support they need. For instance, if they're coming onto your board, they may need something like training in Robert's Rules of Order, or how to read financials, for instance. Keep your meetings youth friendly. Provide snacks and water when possible. Everyone, even adults, appreciate that. Start your meetings with an icebreaker or an inclusion activity. This can help, set an upbeat and welcoming tone. These help everyone to get to know one another and to be comfortable sharing. Be intentional about involving the youth in discussion. Ask for their input, but be sensitive to putting them on the spot, especially if they're new to the group. You don't want to do that. Opportunities for the youth to talk with an adult elbow partner in a more of a small group can help ease them into speaking out in the large group. Address and minimize barriers to youth participation, such as meeting times and transportation. Those are 2 big ones. You may need to be more flexible in scheduling meetings after school hours, for instance, and you may have to provide transportation to and from meetings for kids. Celebrate their progress, their strengths, their successes. This is good advice for group members of any age, and especially helpful to the healthy development of young people. You might consider assigning an adult group member as an official mentor to check in with the youth regularly and to help ensure that they're getting the support they need. Also, all adult group members can kind of unofficially mentor, and all should share in modeling inclusive and collaborative behavior. It's also good to good practice to include a statement of commitment to youth engagement in your bylaws or your mission or operating procedures. This helps institutionalize youth engagement as a priority in your organization. This isn't a comprehensive list, but really just some important practices to consider. Grow and Lead has pulled together a more comprehensive list, and we've developed a couple of kind of best practice tools that I'll tell you more about in a minute. But first, Andrew, I'd like to get back to you. What were some of the things that helped you become engaged and to stay engaged as a kid? Anything that you would add to this list?
I can't think of anything I added right now, but I think the orientation was huge. That was a big part of the Children's Museum board. And I remember joining with like there was a couple other adults part of the orientation. So that was, great to kind of walk into the experience. Our term started together, and also understand that there's people who look like they have a lot more experience with the organization, but don't. I think that just putting everyone on the equal playing field and making that really clear with that orientation was really great.
All right. Thank you. So I mentioned a moment ago that we've developed a couple of best practice tools for nonprofits. And one of them is a youth engagement checklist that includes the bullet points from the last slide and about a dozen more for a total of like 20 solid tried and true practices for youth and adult partnerships. And we'll send this checklist out to everyone who's registered for the webinar today. If your organization is just considering working with young people, or if you're just in the beginning stages, the checklist is a good tool that can help kind of serve as a guide for you. And then we've taken those 20 practices and we've incorporated them into a youth engagement assessment survey, which can be a very helpful tool for nonprofits if you're currently working with young people. It's a lot like a board assessment or an organizational assessment, but it's all around youth engagement. So it's online, it's anonymous, so no one knows how any one person answers. Basically, it works like we send you a link that you share with your board or your staff or whatever group you want to use it with. And they're asked, to what extent do you agree that this practice is followed in your organization? And then they can respond on a scale from highly agree to highly disagree. And when all the responses are in, Grow and Lead develops a report that shows how the group as a whole responded to the items. And it really helps you identify areas of strength and opportunities for improvement. And it's a really good document to have for starting a conversation about how you work with young people. A nice aspect of the assessment is that it comes through us from Grow and Lead, an impartial outside party, which is oftentimes really helpful when you're doing assessments and or you need to have kind of tough or sensitive conversations. So it's nice to have that outside facilitation. And we do make some recommendations also based on how your folks answer the survey. Since the assessment survey is relatively new, we're particularly interested in feedback from users so we can tweak it and improve as needed. So we are offering this for a limited time at no cost. If it sounds helpful to your organization, please reach out to us. We're happy to have you pilot it. Melissa will be sending out a follow-up email to everyone, and we'll include that checklist and our contact info so you can reach out to us about the survey. And we'll also include a copy of the youth engagement pyramid as well. So, well, I know I've presented a lot of ideas to consider and practices to have in place to engage youth. Um, for some adults, the thought of working in partnership with young people can seem pretty intimidating. Um, but please don't feel daunted or like you have to have everything perfectly in order to start working with kids. It's really about building a relationship, and we all have the capability to do that. And we know that relationships can be a little messy too. One thing I've heard time and again from young people, and that I've experienced firsthand, is that they don't expect or need adults to be perfect. What's important is that you be genuine, sincere, and treat them with respect. Show them that you care and that you value their contributions and their partnership, and they'll want to partner with you and they will amaze you. So Andrew, is there anything else that you would like to comment on before we move into Q&A?
I don't think so. I think, just to sum it all up, if I didn't have the experiences I did as a young person, I know I would not be where I'm at today. And it's great to kind of look back and think about all of these all these slides you presented and how that related to my life, 15, 20 years ago. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I want to remind folks too of the Volunteer Professionals Mastermind Networking session Thursday, May 5th at 1. It'll be an opportunity to dig deeper into any of the areas we've touched on today, but in more of an informal format. It'll be an opportunity for sharing and learning from one another. And I look forward to seeing you there. So from here, we'll move into Q&A. If you haven't already, you can type questions into the chat box, anything that you might want to ask me or Andrew. I don't know, Melissa, do we have
I'm not seeing any questions now, but it does take folks just a moment to put those in. So I can say, I think that this is wonderful. I think you touched on one of the points that I always try to make sure of is that, when youth are serving with adults, that they do actually have a voice and not for it not to appear that, for genuinely to make sure that they have a voice and they're not just considered a youth person on board and somebody tells them otherwise about their input. I love that, how you address that.
Awesome.
Oh, how about other people? How are you? I did put a poll in here. Can I, before people sign off or anything, can I launch this next poll? And it's just like a poll that helps us a little bit engage how.
Certainly.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the fact that we have such a variety of folks on here because, we all want to diversify our youth and it's our volunteer pools. And the more that we do that, and especially giving youth a meaningful voice in that, it brings a completely different perspective to the work. I mean, things like we used to have a saying in a place that I work that perception is deception. We may think that we are, oh, thank you everyone for this. I'll go ahead and I'll share the results. That perception is deception. We may think that we're great and we're so open to youth, but asking them, I think is wonderful too, because you may find out some other things and give them the opportunity to feel differently about it. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So much. Yeah. Well, I'm not seeing any questions.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay. Well, if anybody anybody does have questions, you can get in touch with us. Like I said, we'll be sending a couple of documents out to you, and then I'll have our contact information as well. So
Absolutely.
thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here today. It was a nice big group. Good to see
It
people.
was. Absolutely. And, you know, honestly, Linda is a great resource. Her whole entire team is. So if you are really, you know, a few months down the road, you run into something, you're thinking, oh, I wish I could go back and ask, come back and, oh, hey, here's one. One of our concerns is the ability to track young people who potentially attend our programs. How can we maintain confidentiality, but have it count in our reports? Hey, that's a great one. What do you think, Linda?
The ability to track young people who potentially attend our programs. How can we maintain confidentially?
What kind of organization are you with? This is Trina. You can unmute yourself, Trina, if you like. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
It's hard to write it all down.
It sure
I'm with the
is.
Alzheimer's Association,
Oh.
and we really want to start engaging with young people because it's important for them to begin now with healthy living, healthy lifestyles, as well as understand how to take care maybe of their elderly parents, grandparents, as it relates to Alzheimer's and dementia. But if we invite them to our programs, it's the confidentiality issue. If they're under 18, how do we, you know, go about, I don't know, capturing their information, even if this is, you know, names, even zip codes.
What are you concerned about doing that online?
No, well, online, in person, it doesn't matter, but capturing names can sometimes be a problem if they're under 18. And it's something that we submit because of grants. We always capture names, you know, location or zip codes at least. So it's a problem. So I just wondered if anybody else ran into that.
So it's to report it to your funder is what where the issue is?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I'm not sure why they would need to have names.
Yeah, I just had one here. I think this is a good idea. Taylor says, you know, we do pre and post tests that pertain to the presentation. They fill out with the first 3 letters of their last name and their birth date, and then they answer the questions. The other thing you could do is, if your funder doesn't need names, I would say, you know, a code, if you have a volunteer management system and we have access to one that you can use, they're given a code, like their number, and then you would know who they are. They'd be in the system, but their identity could be protected that way. What would you think?
Thank you. Yeah, that might work. It's definitely something we can take back and talk about.
Yeah, and I like the idea of the first 3 letters of their last name too, and you know, their birthday. That might be able to do it too. Yeah, especially if you do need to follow up with them on. Yeah, thank you, Taylor. Or a middle name is a first name, street name for the last name. Oh yeah, that's a good idea too.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, good. You know what? I love this when we all help each other. This is wonderful. Any other questions? And you know what? If you do need more help on that, just let me know. I'll put my contact information in there, and we can help with some of that. We come across those kind of confidentiality issues quite frequently. Yeah. It takes a minute to think of them, the answers, but yeah, we're here to help. Well, with that, I want to say thank you to everyone. Oh, look at that. Yeah, I think that's wonderful. I'll go ahead and I'll stop the recording now, if that's all right with everybody.
All righty. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you, Andrew, very, very much.